Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are back on K2Born. I'm Tony Jacopan, pleased to be with you. And topic of the day let's say, the category trends will be today cartography explains the success or the failure of a nation. So obviously we do not pretend to explain you everything, but we think that we can provide you some insights that can be truly relevant concerning some nation of Asia, some nations of Latin America. So let's try to enjoy it. Okay, so today we can have some issues such as until what extent China is the most country with more inhabitants, until what extent can we relate the success of let's say Europe to demographics? Can we relate the late years of decline to a problem of this? So this is what we're going to do right now. First of all, what we're going to do, just to explain it, is to consider that the assumption have to be absolutely truly checked out, just to be sure that when you make your business plan, you're not going to commit any mistake. In that sense, we've been using here the OECD statistics, most of them from Angus Madison, was responsible of this area, and we're going in the book of reference in this issue is Countries of World Economic OECD editions. So we're going to see it. You see lots of numbers, but we're going to need to insist on a few of them. So first of all, what can we say? So as you can see, first, that the period that we are considering is pretty big because we go from year 1 to year 2003. What we're going not to insist on all this data because we could spend hours, not to say years, on this, but we're going to insist on a few issues. In that sense, one of the most relevant one is just say, okay, what was the more populated country? So we can see just briefly when we go through it. India, India, India. Change here. Go back to India, and afterwards on the land of period of the latest period was China. So here you may have some surprise because you say, just to answer the first question, well, China was not during the war period. The war period being period year 1 to year 2003 was only the leading country only during the last 300 years, which is not that big at the end. And well, if you consider last survey that my the economist basically say that India is going to become again in 2020-25 the leading power in terms of world population. So this is really interesting because you say I want to go to China just for the population, maybe you should leave it out. Okay, now again, you want to say that okay. What was the weight of Europe in terms of population comparing it to Asia? Here you can see that there's a huge disadvantage of Europe, total Western Europe. When if you add it, you've got only at this period around 30 million people. When you compare it to total Asia, excluding Japan, you can see that Asia has been always more populated. So it's something that you can extrapolate. Even if we go in, let's say, just at the eve of the Industrial Revolution, so we go to this year, I'm going to go up to 1820. Oops. Well, what you can see is that we've got 200 million people around here. Just to close it perfectly. And by opposition, if we move on, contrasting it with Asia, you can see the population was so treble, and we didn't count to consideration Japan, so it was 700 million people. So there's absolutely many magnitudes that are completely different, and in that sense, it's really important to notice, and you can understand why Asia was more powerful to Europe at this page, at this period. Now, if you want to look at it, just to move back to one of the major phenomenon of this period was the discovery of Americas. Just to see that it was terrific issues. You can see, for instance, if we go on one of these countries that was discovered by Hernan Cortés in 1519. Just go here in Mexico. So here you have some issues that are really interesting. For instance, or for people from Latin America. This is the population of Mexico, 7.5 million, and you can see that in just one century, population divided by 3. And you say, how many years were necessary? Well, it was necessary 350 years just to recover the population. So it's just amazing to see the impact of it, and you can see that without any doubt, you can see that it has been a major demographic disaster of all times. Okay, in that sense, you say, okay, it was not obviously exclusively los conquistadores of Cortes that made this collapse, but it was a clash of disease, of civilization, and due to this lack of defense from for India, that provoked such a big collapse. Okay, but it's always interesting to refer to this element. Okay, so this element concerning some evolution, and just to say by opposition, when we consider Western Europe, total Western Europe, if we look around, just small reference to it, or Western offshoot, we can see that they cannot compete all the time with Asia. And in that moment where the bottom of the pyramid, I refer to the fact that you need to have people with less than a living, where you get that people that will reach middle class will become a key asset for a country. You can say that this is a real pain for European Union, EU28, and for US, that even with NAFTA, with Mexico and Canada, with this free trade agreement, it's not enough. They need to integrate new partners in their association if they want to become more successful. So this is something that is really problematic, and this is something that we'll try to figure out how it can work. But first of all, before focusing exclusively on the worldwide population in absolute number, what we're going to do is we're going to consider the relative number in percentage. So again, what we can see here is that something pretty relevant. If we go on compare, if we focus on what we had considered for the world period as a country with more population, China, you can see that if it's true that you got a huge number of Chinese people, we're talking about 1,350,000,000 Chinese people. Well, there was less Chinese people than right now. And if you look at it, you compare. Right now, we've got 1 out of 5 people in the world is Chinese. And when you compare it with the previous period, let's say move back in the 20th century, 24, 18th century, we're talking about 36, 23, 28, 23, 26. So this is something that it's a big issue, and it's such an issue that nobody referred to it. So lots of people explain the success of China today. No, it's obviously much more linked with the fantastic, with the ability to read the policy from the Chinese leaders, and this is the reason why it's really important to mention it, because population is not key success factor of this country. But by opposition, when you look around, when you look at the flip side, it's the fact that Chinese population is getting always older. This may constitute in the next year a factor of decline for China, because it means that the population portion of active people will decrease a lot. Lots of prestation will be dedicated to these people, and as it happened in industrialized countries, this is a major turmoil because basically young people are forced to live in a situation where basically they cannot assume it. And you have lots of investment in the real estate factors because people are preparing their retirement. And this makes that you've got some prices that are maintained artificially high. And this is a huge issue. Now, when we compare it, India, on the other hand, has far more option in that sense because the population is getting higher. The population of India is going to go up to 1,400 million people. Sorry. So it shows a huge difference. And again, if we just try to compare, to try to figure out the possible success of a country, a possible decline of a country. So if you look around and you say, moving back to Mexico, so what can we say here? And it's quite interesting. Mexico, you say, okay, in terms of population, we saw that population decreased a lot. But in terms of percentage of worldwide, you can say that it's even worse because in absolute number divided by 3, but in relative number it's divided by more than 4. And you say, okay, when was Mexico able to recover the actual size in terms of population? Well, we need to wait for a long period of time because go for 0.4, 0.7, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 0.1, 0.5, and only in 2003. So it means that the weight of the invasion of the conquistadores, the weight of the discovery of the new world, well, has been a huge pain for this country. You say if we consider other Latin American country, the weight is not so big, but for Latin America, if you look for the total Latin America, you can see the population has been divided 2.5 and began recovering. But in other areas, Portuguese expansion was far slighter. But you can notice because basically, well, just moving here, I don't know if you can see it, here, 4% of mankind, and you can see it was necessary to wait until, oops, here we are. Well, Pointer is not such a great tool, that is fine. I don't know, let's try to see. Here we are. Okay, so to wait for 400 years. If you withdraw Mexico from it and Peru, you can see that it was much before, but the impact of the Spanish colonization was without any doubt really tough on these people. And again, this is something that I truly wanted to comment. Now, if we move further on, what can we say? Here, this is, for me, one of the most interesting issues that we can add. It's just about contrasting GDP evolution with a country with more population and adding as well GDP in itself or GDP per capita. Here, what we can see is that when we go over time, it's without any doubt that the population was tool just to grow. And if we move on the field, for instance, country with more population, India, well, it's a line correlation. 1500 16, 16 China, perfect alignment. If we move again, the alignment is still, you can see, at least in terms of GDP, boom, boom. And here, this is, let's say, the first major disruption in that sense, because we can see that during the period 1820 and 1912, at the moment where basically the revolution, the industrial revolution happened in the 1870s, this is a moment where Europe takes the lead. So how can we explain it? Well, it's really important to realize that during this period, just to go, let's put it 1870, we move back until the, let's say, just to mention it, for instance, 1492, the discovery of the Americas. Well, we've got a major change at this point because basically this is a moment where European began making lots of discovery. Of course, the major Portuguese discovery were made before, but just to have dates that you may easily remember, the discovery of America by Christopher Columbus. This is the date you can make it. And what is interesting to note is that on top of Portuguese innovation about sailing, Spanish discovery, Rinascimento Italiano, French discoveries, British discoveries, and Germans. Well, this and all this element, all this spillover, basically enable Europe to take the lead. And this is something that it's really important to look at it, because as soon as a country takes the lead in terms of innovation, it manages to annihilate the advantage that the population can be. Okay, this is really important to look at back at this factor. So when we're considering right now about China, that China is moving back, it means several things. It means that basically the discovery, the innovations that we have right now in Western world are not as good as they were before. So decline in terms of innovation, decline in terms of population, people are getting older, and by opposition, China, that is growing and growing, so moving back in terms of its lost dynamics that they had before. Now, this is, let's say, the element that explains the dichotomy between evolution, between population and country. If we look at the variable GDP per capita, we can say that making taking it, living apart, let's say, or small fiscal hub, or really small territories, so country with more than 10 million inhabitants, what we have is that the preponderant part of several factors. One is the homogeneity in terms of population. Italy is a good example. The importance to favor export. And in that sense, Netherlands and UK were a good example of these issues. And the issue concerning US, just to have a strong power based in the case of US, as you all know, on economic, military, cultural, and that's it. And thanks to this pillar, basically US was able to lead the world. Now the point is, until what extent will they able to maintain such a GDP per capita with the dysfunctions that they have in US in terms of trade deficit, in terms of fiscal deficit, so the famous twin deficit, and on the other hand, so this, let's say, the increasing gap existing between people with low wages and high wages. So if you're interested in this issue specifically, I will recommend you to go on the specific issues on K21. But at this point, what you can say is that if you want to sum it up, demographics plays a huge role to develop some current policies at the country level, but innovation has become far more important than over time. And this is the reason why we can conclude that demography helps, but didn't explain everything. So I hope you enjoy it, and have a nice day on K21. Bye-bye.